Okay.
Yes, good morning. This is the Utilities Committee meeting for May the 8th. In attendance, we have the committee itself, consisting of myself, Mr. Alan Howeller, and Marilyn Duke. We have a guest attending from the Environmental Engineering Services, and that is Mr. Frank Leone, and a second guest from Environmental Engineering, and that is Steve Cantor there. Let's begin the meeting with a approval of the previous minutes from December. They are not posted in this meeting. They had been posted after the previous December meeting. So I would ask for your approval on that basis.
So moved.
Can I hear a motion, a second?
Jeff, you'll have to second since I haven't seen the minutes lately. I'll just abstain without objection.
Very well. I second. So the motion is carried. The minutes approved from December. The primary discussion this morning for the committee is to look at the most effective way to finance the replacement of the Sharon Avenue water main. As we all know from the previous meetings, we have put the main out for bid and received, I think there were a total of 6 bids, Wally, of which the lowest was about $1.6 million. I will ask Wally to talk about the actual numbers in more detail, but our purpose primarily is to focus as to whether the best method of financing this over a period of time is a 20 or 25 or 30-year loan from the OWDA. That is a decision that basically has a much lower loan cost than some existing loans, and there may be some value in refinancing, if you will, the existing higher loan debts. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Cordes.
Well, thank you. We have Frank Leone here because he and Steve Cantor were the architects of putting this project together. I'll give you a brief summary, and then I'd like to turn over to Frank to expound on, or Steve, you guys decide. As you know, for the past 3 years, there's been a high importance placed on replacing the main from Chester Road to the town hall. From the town hall to the water tower, that main was previously replaced in 1998 when we put the water tower in. We know that that main is from 1912 or older, and that it's twice its life expectancy of 50 years. We've had numerous breaks there. So priority was given to this project. The goal, my task assigned by council, finance committee, and utility committee was to get a low interest loan or grant. We failed in getting a grant, but we are able to get a low interest loan from the Ohio Water Development Authority. There were 7 bids actually, Mr. Baysmith. In fact, I think one of them even declined a bid, but we had 7 that were turned in. The highest bid was $2.238 million. And of course, the low bid for WAC and Valier excavating is $1.472 million. Within that $1.472 million, it includes replacing the taps of the residents' homes from the water main to the curb stop. The curb stop to the water main is our responsibility. We know there's 78 homes connected to the section of main that we're going to replace. We do not know whether they're lead or not. So we built into that pricing based on materials. If we have a lead line from the main to the curb, we will replace it with the proper materials. And because we're doing that, the Ohio Water Development Authority has given us a 0.5% discount on our loan if we remediate any lead lines that we discover. We also are getting a 0.5 point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, we're getting a 0.5 point discount because we're a returning customer. We previously had loans from the Ohio Water Development Authority. I'll talk about interest rates shortly. Within the bid, above and beyond the $1.472 million, is what I consider a very low bid of $150,000 to replace from the curb stop to the basements of up to 78 homes. That is an option. We need to talk about in this committee, I believe, how we proceed with that. Additionally, within the loan amount that we are requesting, we want to transfer approximately $214,000 at a higher interest rate, which was the planning and development of this project through the engineering services. Mr. Leon will talk on that, I believe. There's also an $86,800 that needs to be included in the loan to reimburse the waterworks for what they advanced to re-rent the bridge on Sharon Road. And that will be deducted from the overall project. So, Frank, I'm going to briefly talk about interest rates, and then I want you to talk about points that I might have missed or where your expertise is.
Sure, no problem.
Wally, excuse me, before you go into interest rates and defer to Frank, may I ask a question about the scope of this application? You're speaking of replacing the water main from Chester Road to the railroad tracks. Is that correct?
The town hall. We would go under the railroad. Yeah.
Does it include the replacement of the water main from Sharon Road to Cleveland or Willow on South Troy?
It does, and I'll talk about that. I'll jump to that real quick.
Thank
So
you.
part of the project also is to replace the South Troy water main to the Albion Avenue former crossing, go under that crossing and then connect it to the Greenville Avenue main to increase water pressure and water firefighting flow. Along the way would replace the hydrants as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So initially, when we make this application, which is already in the hands of the Ohio Water Development Authority, we default to 30 years. That's what we have in place. We can change that. We have until the 15th of this month, to tell them we want a 20 or 25. There's a difference. The 25 or 30-year loan is 1.56% interest for 30 or 20 years. Should we choose a 20-year loan, it's slightly lower at 1.37%. It does make a difference if you opt for the higher interest rate over 30 years versus the 1.37% over 20 years. It's about $220,000 of additional interest over the course of the loan. But it also affords more cash flow. Maybe Mr. Leon or Mr. Cantor can speak on that topic. So I'd like Frank or Steve, you guys team up a lot, so you pick, to pick up areas that I have not expertise in and kind of bring this together. Frank?
Okay, a couple of things. One, Wally, is, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding the geography. I believe the project goes to Arbor Place, which is past Town Hall. Is that correct?
Arbor Place is Town Hall.
Is that Town Hall? Okay. I guess I was wrong in the terminology. As Wally mentioned, the application was put together to fund the base bid for the entire Sharon Road water line, the railroad crossings, et cetera. It also asked for bids on what it would take to replace the laterals for the homeowners, and we received a bid of $150,000, which is $2,000 per tap if they were all used by the contractor. That's an alternative that may or may not be implemented and would be implemented only for those lines that were found to be lead. And one thing that the committee should discuss is how they do that from the standpoint of, we have the money in the application for the village. How do they want to deal with that as it relates to the property owners, and whether or not the village would pay for those taps with the $2,000 apiece, or some method used to recapture from the owners, whatever the village wants to do, but the money exists. Now, one thing, just so everyone understands OWDA, this really is set up as a line of credit so that any money we don't spend is just taken off the loan before we start the amortization. So that's why we put some things in there that you may not use, but no harm, no foul. When it gets to the end, if we didn't spend the 150, it would just come off the loan before they started amortizing it. So picture it as a line of credit, if that, from the standpoint of financing. We put in the default number of 30 years because we know the life expectancy of a water line, a main of that size, is 50 years by state statute. And we know the last Sharon Road line lasted 100. So normally we try to tie the interest or the term of the loan to the useful life of the facility and stretch out the loan as far as possible for cash flow for the owner. So at least from the standpoint of an engineering perspective, a water line financed at 30 years would extend, the line would last well past the end of the loan. And the useful life would carry on. So that's why we put in 30. You'll notice from, I believe, the chart you got that 13.
Hey, Frank, just to mention, we're also replacing a 4-inch under the railroad tracks at Albion.
Yes.
We're going to, so that to improve service and pressure in that looped area there.
So the real difference, I guess, this on a short-term basis is that the decision to do a 30-year loan versus, let's say, the 20-year loan would be about $30,000 a year in debt service payments. And obviously the 25-year loan gives us somewhere right in between, about $13,000 or $14,000 more than the 30 years. So I think that's one thing, council, that's about where that stands. The application repays the planning loan that was funded to do the design and get the railroad permits and that kind of thing. It also, as Wally mentioned, replaces the payments to Smith to relocate the water line in the bridge project, which was ongoing. So all those things I think the application is sound, and we'll continue to work with OWDA to respond to questions. But, we will have to tell them finitely what term we want. So if the committee can make that decision and pass that along, we'll work with OWDA on that.
I have one quick question for clarification.
Yeah, Don.
Hi. The amount of the scheduled payment, that is a semi-annual payment, right? 2 per year. On the memo, the 87,000 is the total annual payment, Okay,
but it is broken.
I'm sorry, I have some charts that I printed off the other day. So it's for the 20-year, I guess the 30-year loan. It's a $43,000
Every 6 months, correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
Don, I added on the memo, I added the 2 from the chart to show the total annual payment.
thank you.
Okay. So I don't know how you want to do this, Wally, in terms of discussing that at the committee or any other questions.
So Frank, I've got a question. So I'm the treasurer, and of course I'm very interested in the cash flow.
Yes.
So you mentioned cash flow differential would be about $32,000 if we go between the 20 and the 30.
Yes.
Do you have a sense of, for me, as I mentioned to the chair, it would be great to understand our overall expenditure on enterprise for, at least a 10-year period.
Mm-hmm.
As we reviewed that before we agreed to a rate increase, we had a spreadsheet, and it was some confusion in some of the numbers and so forth. And it was very difficult for me to really follow the spreadsheet in terms of where are we in the numbers, okay, and what does that look like in terms of starting to accumulate some reserves to address the deficit that we see on an ongoing basis. As at the beginning of the meeting, as I shared, as I reviewed our cash, our balances for our enterprise funds, we're running for this first quarter about a $200,000 deficit. So, of course, that concerns me, but that did not include the new water rate payments that should have come out, I guess, in April. So I guess for me, and I like to look at all the numbers, is like having a spreadsheet that really now brings in this scenario that shows to the committee, where are we? And as we build this additional debt and then we lose some debt down the road, what does this thing look like in a, let's say a 10-year period, or as an example? That would be extremely helpful to be able to quantify cash flow situation and how we're looking, because that will be an element of what residents will want to know in terms of, are we going to assume an additional increase in water rates if we take on this additional loan sooner than what we had predicted?
Wally, I guess the first response to your question is that the memos and reports that we provided late last year try to document all of those questions you just asked and move it forward 10 years. Okay. And, I can go through and some of that, but I guess in general, we built a rate structure or a suggested rate structure that covered base operating costs. Okay. Added in the existing debt service, some of which is going away over the next several years. Added in a CPI index increase of, Steve, was it 4% or 3%? Can Steve hear me? Oh, I guess not. A CPI index increase, okay, and then an anticipated level of debt service from new projects, starting with Sharon Road, okay, and accumulating a 10% reserve to make your reserve balance go up. So those were all built in to what eventually became the rate increase you passed over that next 3 years. I think what I'm saying is that we believe that what the rating has done will put you on a course to cover your operations, cover a reasonable CPI index increase over each and every year, put a 10% in there for a debt reserve, anticipates what debt comes off, and we add, including the amount for the Sharon Road. And then we built in, based on discussions with Wally and Kevin, potential projects that we thought would go on in addition to what Sharon Road is, so that you wouldn't have to further increase rates to do reasonable projects based on what we know. And that's built in there also. And what's built in, I believe, is, and the projects can change. The projects can be, whatever we deem as we move forward. But the actual amount of money covers debt service in excess of an additional $100,000 a year in debt service. So that as we find projects that are important, and we're going to be talking about some water loss, and the water loss issue is pretty significant in the village. So as we find projects that Kevin finds where a replacement line would reduce water loss, part of the debt service that we've built into this rate. So I think what you've got is a rate structure, and you did it for, I think you passed 3 years worth already. If you keep up with the trends of that report, that you'll be able to cover what we've already cost, cover operations, get a reserve account that we think is putting in is 10% as a reserve account, have a CPI increase on an annual basis that we figured into it, and build projects that will come up, because that's just the way it is when you have water and sewer systems that need repair. And there's, the numbers are there, Mike. I think if I would refer you to the October 18th, I think there was a memo on that, followed up by an October 29th memo, and a January response to the committee about some of the questions that were asked, that show how it was constructed and has those pieces in it.
Okay.
And I think that there were even some discussions as to, do you raise the base rate? Do you raise the volume charge? All of which have implications. and you chose to raise the volume charge, I think on the water and the base rate on the sewer, and they equate in terms of about the amount of revenue you get, but the process is different.
Okay, thanks, Frank.
Mhm.
I'll go back and revisit those documents, and then if I have any questions, I'll contact you through Wally.
That's fine, and we'd be more than glad to, like I said, we'd be more than glad to spend time with the book committee and you. The pandemic has kept it a little more difficult to talk, but yeah, there are a lot of questions there. Wally and Kevin have gone over it. We've spoken with them, and I think it's a very reasonable and rational approach to moving forward. The thing that is flexible that everyone should understand is we built in some debt service for future projects, but those projects do not need to be identified now, only that we recognize some kind of volume that you probably will expect to do over the next decade.
Frank,
Yes.
I'm glad you have built in funding for future projects, not specifically identified, but did you consider those projects which were mentioned in the utility committee and discussed with your firm back in, I think it was July of 2018? If you'll recall.
Are we talking about some of the like replacing 4-inch lines for pressure and fire protection?
Yes.
Those are all on the table. And obviously EPA, and I don't want to switch into wastewater too much, but also EPA has obviously been, aggressive with the village as it relates to getting some of the I&I out of the sewer system. We try to reflect those kind of projects along the way. Okay. Again, not specifying one because one might turn up that, a water line breaks somewhere.
Right.
I know Kevin has now got equipment to do water leak detection. So that although we know that lines are going to have to be replaced, they're all old. The specific project may come out of something that Kevin finds in doing his work. And again, for the committee, I think the idea would be to try to watch, as we do a project and it turns out that that's going to take a project of X and that's going to be so much debt service, how does it impact the $100,000 or so that we sort of budgeted in there per year, and so you can sort of keep track of that and know when you're inside the guidelines built into the current rates or where you might be going outside of them. And we can't envision short-term going outside of them because I think we've thought about the things that we know about, and maybe the biggest project that everyone's talked about for 3 or 4 years is Sharon Road, which we think is going to be a real, positive.
So what is everyone's thought about 30 years versus 20 for cash flow?
Can I say something here? The state is willing to lend us money at 1.6% approximately.
That's correct.
1.7 or 1.56, depending on the term.
Okay, 1.6. Say, let's just round it up.
Yes.
Can't we get? I'm just wondering if we can't get a commercial loan less than that. Just pay for the project, and we're gonna end up spending the kind of money that we're gonna spend anyway, are we not? I mean, it's gonna cost us $80,000 or $90,000 a year in revenue anyway. Do we care if we're going to spend it at a bank, or do we have to spend it at Ohio? And the reason I'm wondering about that, the last time we took out a loan for the waterworks, the treatment plant, we could not pay that loan off early, so we were stuck with a loan that went out. I don't know how many years has that been, Wally? 30? What will it be in 22 when we're done with it? Can't hear you, Wally.
Are you asking me about the rate or the term?
No. How long was that term?
30 years.
30 years, and it's just now coming due. I
Um,
mean, we'll be done with it now. And how much extra have we paid for that loan because we weren't able to save the interest by paying it off? That's why the Ohio State, this money that comes in from Ohio State Waterworks sometimes is not the best deal. And with today's interest rates, I'll bet we can beat 1.5. I bet we can get it down under a point. And if we can, and we can borrow it for a long time, 20 to 30 years, we would save hundreds of thousands of dollars over the term of that loan. Am I right, Mike Bessel?
There is a possibility it could get lower. We'd have to go through an underwriting process. It may be worth looking at. I don't know who we would start with, Wally and Mike Bogran, but maybe a call to a couple of banks to say, is there an appetite for this? I have had some experience with bonds. I know we are very bondable. The problem with that is there's quite a bit of money required to get that set up. So that I would steer clear of that in this low rate environment.
Mm-hmm.
But to satisfy your curiosity, Alan, I think to maybe just reach out to a couple of banks and just ask them, is there a chance we could refinance for less than 1.5? That's getting pretty low. Commercial loans now, if you're really good, 3.5, maybe 3. If you're a really good risk, for a village that's got plenty of money to pay it back, I'm not sure how much better than that it gets, but it's worth a call. And while I've got the floor for just a moment, my 2 cents, I understand the idea. You kind of match your debt service to the life expectancy, and that's always a good idea. The old German in me, though, if I can save a nickel, I do it. And I believe that given the reserves in the enterprise fund and the village capacity overall, if we can save $200,000 over the life of the loan and pay it down over 20 years, and then have that gone in 20 years and be better equipped to take on a new major project, I know I don't get a vote here, but my approach would be go for the 20 years, save $200,000 because you can. If we were more strapped for cash, then you're kind of forced into the longer term. Also, I think our current debt service is about $145,000 on one of the loans. And how much on the other, Wally?
The combined totals just shy 150. I believe it's 149. One is 75. One is 74,000.
Okay, so a 20-year, if it's 86 plus roughly 32 a year, that's 118 or 120. So we'd be looking at, unless I'm wrong, Frank, correct me, 120 versus 145. We trade one for the other. We've got a short 1-year bridge, to get to 2022, 23, where we'll have to use a little reserve because we got double debt service. But, where it would be a savings. I mean, we'd be paying out less debt service even at 20 years. So that's my 2 cents.
And one, just to make sure we're all on the same page, the way this loan at the state works is we won't have to make our first payment till mid-22.
Oh,
So
perfect. So
there's
one
not
of them would be
even-
gone.
Yeah. So that's that. We tried to get as close as Wally wanted to get as close as he could to washing the 2 out and replacing it with this one. And we think we're real close if we understand that. So everything I've heard is you're correct. I just don't know that the 20, the issue of commercial, we would obviously have no problem working with that, to get that done. We've always found that bond counsel costs and that kind of thing to get to the loan does add some significant costs. OWDA's fee is a one-time 0.0035% fee for the entire loan.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frank. Bonding's probably not worth it unless you're looking at several $1 million. If we were going for 5 million, it might make sense to spend 100K to get bonded. But I think it's either if we can get a commercial lender, a bank, or go to Ohio. I don't think bonding's an option here.
the total fee at Ohio Water Development is $7,200 for the 1.6 million or 2 million.
Yeah, that's hard to beat.
But anyway, that's obviously, that's the committee decision. The hard decision is the committee's. But if they thought they could beat it, we'd be more than glad to work with that. But
Got it. I think a 20-year also helps satisfy a little bit of Alan's concern that here we are with a 30-year loan. We'd like to pay it down now, but we can't because we're locked into 30. I guess we can't roll that loan into the new one. We'd be repaying it and that'd be a problem. So instead of looking at ourselves saying, oh my God, it's 20 years. Now we got 10 more of this. We're not allowed to pay it early. You know, you get done in 20 years. That's pretty neat in my mind. So
yeah. That is the one, not flaw, but the one thing with OWDA is the loans are not callable. You must pay to the term. So
yeah, right.
So that is my question. And comparing a commercial loan to the OWDA loan is whether or not we can get a commercial loan that may be prepaid without penalty, without financial penalty, at the rate of over 20 years for 1.3 or better, which is what the
yeah, Marilyn, I don't think you're going to get a 1.3.
Well,
I do think that with our bank account we can qualify for commercial loan. I don't know what the interest would be, but I believe we would qualify. I think Mike makes good sense on the 20-year loan compared to a 30-year loan. I think that you know, without the inheritance tax, because we'd have paid off the water works real quick with that last inheritance tax, and we wouldn't have this burden. Now we still have a burden for another 2 years, and if we can do this project and not start paying for it until that other burden sunsets, we're basically trading dollars for dollars. Is that right? Is that wrong?
Yeah, you're right.
Well, then I think the decision's pretty easy. We go with the state and 20 years. I doubt if we can get a loan that's going to be cheaper than the state loan. I just don't like the fact that we end up having to that we can't prepay it down.
I agree with Alan. Yeah.
So as we speak, I just asked one of our banks if they have anything to offer, and hopefully we can get something back here in the next 10 minutes.
Thanks, Mike.
I did the same with CFB.
Okay.
Thank you. Both.
We do. How long do we have before we have to do this, Wally? Do we have a couple days?
The 15th, I believe. Is that correct, Frank?
well, the meeting of OWDA is the fourth Thursday of May. Up until that date, we could withdraw the application. You know, if we so chose. Obviously, that would make us wait another month, and you know we can't award the construction contract until that's in place. So those are the deadlines. If we wanted to, defer it, we could say, hey, guys, we're going to come back in June. Don't process it in May. There's no fee. That $7,000 only applies when you sign the paperwork. So to date, there's been no cost associated with the OWDA process. We do have that planning loan that has to be refinanced in there, and if we were to delay at least a month, there would be one payment due on the planning loan of some $6,000, but that's fairly small. So
we may also run into jeopardy with the contractor holding his bid if it goes out too long.
Sure, but let me the fourth Thursday in May is the 28th. Is that correct? That gives us 3 weeks or 2 weeks basically to talk to some banks. In the meantime, we can go ahead and apply.
Yes.
At the 20-year level, and then if something changes, we have a couple weeks yet to figure that out.
Yeah.
That is a motion I would make, that
I second.
we do the 20-year plan and get the application in. And since there's only 2 of us, it's passed.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second that motion
Very
that the
well.
village proceed with a 20-year loan application to OWDA at the rate of 1.37% or better, or lower rather. And in the meanwhile, the village pursue inquiries with commercial loans.
That's
Okay,
acceptable.
say all in favor.
Yeah. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the motion is carried. And we'll proceed with looking at the possibility of commercial loan in addition to the loan presently quoted from OWDA.
Chairman Baysmith, I'm not on the committee, but we'll probably be voting on this. I just wonder why we haven't considered borrowing from ourselves. We have a large amount of money sitting in our BPGI, and I don't know what the interest rate is. Mike, I know we're not making a lot of money, but would we consider actually lending the money to the enterprise fund?
I think that's a good question. Mike, I'll ask you to answer it. The interest rates we get in either case are not that significant.
No, I
Let
mean, that is definitely a possibility also.
Yeah, but let me kind of give you a history, Debbie. You know it very well. That money is basically for a rainy day fund that contingents on something of major catastrophe. I think you're right, though. We could lend it to ourselves. I don't know. I think we'd have to put the project on a special level. On the other hand, though, if you're going to do that, why don't we just take the money out and pay for it right up front and not have any loan?
Well, I would ask Mike Bogrand about the rates we're getting with the money being invested, and are those rates overall or generally higher than 2 or 1.5%? Are we earning more interest with the money invested than we would if we were to lend it to ourselves at the rate of 1.3%, 1.37 or lower?
That's a fair question, Marilyn. So I've looked at our investments, and we have several of them that are maturing that we have to reinvest. We're proceeding on doing some with commercial paper, and we just purchased some commercial paper at 1.5%. So we're right on the cusp of what's available in the market and what the rates are that we would be getting from borrowing money from ourselves. So it's in my mind, we could do it either way, and we could probably make out a little bit of money or not lose any money. But we're right on the cusp.
Thank you.
So I would, my comment to that, I think that is a great idea to consider. The current situation, and and a quick kudos to Mike Bogrand. Thank you for hunting down that commercial paper. We were unclear on whether we could use that, and that's a nice thing to be able to have in this low rate environment. So thanks for all that research and tracking that down. So we're talking about a loan that would be a 20-year time frame. It's highly possible within 5 years, interest rates may tick up to where we could earn close to 2% again. And it wasn't long ago we were earning 3 and 4%. So it might be good if it's just a trade-off, pretty much. It might be good for us to go ahead and take the money from the state and keep our powder dry over in our own coffers in case we could earn more. I like the evaluation though, Debbie, and it's a great concept, but I kind of tend towards the state loan still.
Mike, I'm just thinking that the sentiment of residents had been, we've got all this money and why aren't we using it? I understand that we could in the future come across an opportunity at a higher interest rate, but we're only talking possibly $1.6 million out of what, over $8 million? And the payback, excuse me, the payback comes on the backs of our residents as far as user fees. So I just look at this as a way that we can maximize the use of the BPGI, earn some money, but not, continue to have to raise our user rates for our residents.
I think the assessment of that is that under the idea that you have, the interest rate, the interest paid annually, which is not the total debt service, just the interest annually, is what we would not have to give to the state or to a bank. The principal's got to go back anyway. And so whether we borrow from ourselves or we borrow from the state, the rates can't go down because the money still has to be paid back over a 20-year period. Regarding the use of the funds, I think in previous finance committee sessions, we've seen where we can earn enough revenue through interest to fund quite a few things for our village if we can maintain that fund balance. Plus, have a healthy balance sheet that allows us to borrow at the cheapest rates when we need to borrow and be able to maintain a rainy day fund. I wouldn't want to see that fund balance go down. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see it go up. And I think the treasurer agrees with me. The more we have there, the more we can earn. Given that, the rates would have to stay where they are so that the money can be put back in, or the rates stay where they are because we have to pay the state back. And now the business guy in me says, if I can get somebody to give me money for 1.37%, I do it. That's being able to use the state's money at almost no cost. Frank, can you tell us the interest payments associated with that loan?
You mean the interest only? The amortization, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Steve, I don't know if you ran that on the.
I don't have the amortization schedule. It's probably like a typical loan where interest is higher.
So on the 20-year loan, total interest is $305,525.
Okay.
On the 30-year loan at the, it's a little higher rate.
Yeah. And you divide that by 30 years, it costs me.
It's 533,000. So it's,
yeah,
200,000, over $200,000 difference.
Yeah, that's a big difference. So, 300,000. It cost me only $15,000 a year to use somebody else's money. That's a pretty good deal.
But I guess the thing about borrowing from ourselves, it really depletes our amount of money that we have, and that really affects our borrowing power more than you would think. And so if you're going to save the 200,000, even if it costs us the 200,000 out of our own money, that lowers what we can borrow in the future in case we have a major, there's always something happening. Even this coronavirus thing has shut down a lot of things, but we need to keep that money if we can. And I agree with Mike. If you can get money for 20 years at 1.5 or 1.37, that's a bargain, I think.
Well, I think we've already agreed to a resolution to pursue the 20-year loan, correct?
Correct.
So why don't we continue with that? And on the side, we can look at the possibilities as suggested by Debbie to see whether it makes good sense for us to use the VGPI as a source.
Well, I think one question would be, what would be the interest rate if we borrowed from ourselves? Would we just match the OWDA rate, or would we have some other?
Would it be legitimate for us to borrow from ourselves at a higher rate than available from the state or other source?
I doubt if that's legal.
Yeah, I agree. And on that, you're just taking, the interest, it just goes from one pocket to another.
Yeah. Yeah.
From enterprise to general enterprise, it's just kind of trading money.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point, Mike. I mean, it's all money that residents still have to pay one way or another. So it's just comes through the water bill versus the general fund account, which VPGI supports.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we've agreed to pursue the 20-year and keep in mind that we can continue with the state. Do we need further discussion?
Okay, one other point of clarification. I agree that we would probably have to maintain the OWDA interest rate. As of now, we have two paths here. We can either take the OWDA loan, or we can, if possible, find a lower interest rate, better terms loan available elsewhere. Now, we need to make that decision, I believe, by the 15th. Is that correct?
Actually, it would be by the 28th.
What is it? What was the significance of the deadline of the 15th?
That was the interest rate and term of the loan that I believe we need to let them know by the 15th. But if you withdrew the loan, you'd have up till the 28th, or the loan application you would have until the 28th.
So to be clear, we could tell them on the 15th that that we want the 20-year term at the 1.37% interest rate. And then on the before the 28th, we could tell them, changed our minds, we're not going to take that loan. Is that right?
Correct.
And is the vote of the committee here, does it effectively delegate that decision to the administrator with consultation from the mayor and the treasurer to make that decision?
I thought we just voted on that.
That's what I want to be clear of. I want everyone, if that's what we've delegated, I want to be clear. We don't have to come back to the committee for another vote.
Correct.
Now, the committee just voted, we had a motion and we had it second and we voted for it. So it should go to Wally now to make that application.
Okay, just want everyone to be, that's what I thought too, but I wanted to be clear.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And just to be clear with something I had mentioned before was to try to put it before finance, because that's a committee of the whole. Everybody's at this meeting, Don, so I think everybody's aware of what's going on. There's no need to go any further with this.
Okay, I think that's correct. And also, since we talked about a meeting of finance for this, I've learned that this is effectively, because it's an enterprise fund decision, it's effectively a decision of the Utilities Committee.
Yes.
Or other financial decisions.
Well, I think it's appropriate to put the responsibility of looking at the best financial option on the treasurer and relying on Mr. Bessel's skills, because candidly, I'd have to rely on that myself, because I'm not that current on finance.
So as a member of the Utilities Committee, I would expect to hear the results of the application, to OWDA for the 20-year loan at 1.37%, as well as whether or not and which bank would be willing to lend the village that amount of money at the rate of 1.37 or lower. And for Wally, the administrator, and Mike Bogran with Don Lofty and Mike Bessel Consulting to come forth with the terms in the best interest of the village. I'm not anticipating another follow-up utility committee meeting to go over what we've went over today.
As a member of council, that means that there's only 50% of council that's made this commitment, this financial commitment on behalf of the residents. And I would prefer to see it go to a finance committee where it would be a committee of the whole voting on this. I would also like to hear the results of Mike Bessel, but Mike Bogran's investigation of the possibility of securing the money from ourselves through the VPGI fund.
Well, Debbie, I think that kind of takes away what we do as a committee system.
Alan, no committee has ever made a decision to commit the village to any kind of financial arrangements. It's always gone back to the council or the finance committee as a whole to make that decision.
No.
Well, let me just inject that the recommendation and motion coming from the committee is how to proceed. The vote to accept whichever loan or grant has yet to be made. Is that correct, Wally and Don? Simply applying for the grant does not mean we accept and have signed onto it.
I thought Don said that this being enterprise fund related, that the utility committee has control of this, I guess is what I heard, but maybe I'm wrong.
Can I weigh in just for a second? At the last council, put before you legislation authorizing the administrator to enter into a contract to award the replacement of the water main, tentative and subject to obtaining a low interest loan from the Ohio Water Development Authority, and that was voted unanimously. However, I don't want to do that until I have the proper feedback from the utility committee determining the term of the loan, and thus my request for utility.
I think that's appropriate. I agree with Wally that he has been given that responsibility and should pursue it.
Okay.
I agree.
I think, though, we will want to report back on the decision and the reasons for it once it's made, the results of the investigation, and get that back to council.
I think the council would be very frustrated if we did not.
Yes. Okay. We're on the same page.
So question, so Wally, that means the earliest we could award the grant would be the 15th?
No, I believe, Frank, the 15th is when we need to let them know the term of the loan, and we can withdraw the application up to the 28th, but the deadline's the 28th to submit the application.
Okay, 28th. Okay, thank you.
Wally, if you could walk us through the loan application timeframe after the May 28th deadline to submit the application. What then is the process for OWDA's due diligence? What documents do they generally look at when reviewing the loan application? And generally speaking, how many weeks or months or whatever does it take for them to reach a decision pending confirmation of whatever, and then a final decision sufficient for the village to sign?
Quickly, I have to leave the meeting, so I'm sorry. I've got some other things going on this morning, so thanks, everybody.
Mike, Wally, would you like me to answer that, by the way?
Yes, Frank is our in-house expert on OWDA, so I'll defer that to him.
Frank, thank you.
No, that's right. First of all, the loan application had to be submitted on May 1st to qualify for the May 29th meeting. The OWDA has a list of things that had to be provided, and our application was some 30 pages, including budget data provided by Phyllis and Wally, the cost of the project, bid tabulations, rate structures that you have. So they are doing their due diligence as we speak. And that's why by the 15th, we'd like to tell them the term, and we continue to answer questions as they arise on the packet that was submitted. Okay, so on the 28th, they will make a recommendation to their board, and it will be approved. And within about 3 days, a contract will be provided to the village to sign. And the contract, Wally's already seen that as a standard contract that they have. So in essence, by June 1st, the village is in the position, would be in the position if they sign the agreement to award the contract and go to work on the project. In terms of other timing, this is treated as a line of credit, and each and every month we would provide to them the costs that have been expended, approved for the contractor, et cetera, and they will provide the funds to the village to cover those costs. And then 1 year after the completion of the project, we would get our first debt service payment, which we think now is July of 22.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions or topics on finance? Okay, if I may, we have had a discussion, Wally and myself, regarding some loss of water in our system. And Wally, you mentioned it a little earlier and had sent me a summary via email this morning talking about the loss between what we pump and what we bill. Frank, would you kind of address how we solve that problem, because it's in excess of what we would normally anticipate in a water system? How difficult is it to address the problem of leakage in a system that's 100 years old?
First of all, Steve has gone through and with Kevin, and they've documented the loss, and it seems fairly consistent that even though you have found some significant leaks in the last couple of years, we're still experiencing water loss at approximately 50%. Most systems deem anything over 15 to 20% as excessive. So that's kind of the baseline where it starts to say you better start trying to find it. In the first 15%.
Frank, excuse me, did you say 50% or 15?
50, ma'am, 50.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's okay. And that's a comparison of Phyllis's billing records versus Kevin's pumping records, water.
So we're basically pumping 50% more than we're billing.
It's excessive.
Wally, for some reason, I am not hearing Frank.
I don't think any of us are. I think his computer's locked up, but it should unfreeze. We're at 49.8% water loss, which means we pump more water than we bill for. And there are various ways that can happen. I think David is pulling up the chart that shows from 2018 going forward to the first quarter of 2020, which is 49.51%. More water pumped than billed. There are many ways that this happens. There are water mains that, after beyond their life expectancy, that are aged and become leaking and perforated. And we're finding that on the Sharon Road water main. And when we dig up and repair a break, we see perforations on it. So this is clearly the wise thing to do, is replace this main to help with that. There are other ways that water can be lost. Hopefully Frank will be back online to talk about that, but I'll briefly mention water meters. After 10 years, you are recommended that you replace them because they slow down. They lime up with minerals from the water and they slow down. They never speed up, they slow down. So ours are 15 years old. So
Am I back, Wally? I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go, Frank. I'll drop off. Thank you. I hope you heard me.
I got cut off. I think it's that hour time limit thing, and it didn't put me back on.
All right, take it over.
I was listening to what you said. Yeah, you can approach it by doing water loss studies. You can either do that with private consultants or with the equipment that Kevin's got. We can begin to look at it. Sharon Road will be a benefit, we think. Other lines can be found, and that would be part of the priority for doing capital improvements projects that would reduce that water loss. On the other side of the equation, I think I heard Wally mention, we find that in some cases, what we're dealing with is water meters that are under recording usage because of their age, and that what is not really water loss as much as billing loss because of the meters. So another key issue would be potentially to determine that a water meter replacement program would capture some of that water loss with the improvement of with the capital improvement to replace the meters. Also, you guys are dealing with you don't have radio read meters where you can read effectively the water meter readings, and that's something we always upgrade to at this point in time, and the software, et cetera, to gather all that data. So those are the two ways you approach it, from either trying to find the water loss through the meters or finding the water loss through leaks, or a combination of both.
I might point out, Frank, David, can you scroll back to 2018, please? I just wanted to show you 2018, where it was 62.85 and 60.48, 57.7. So I want to point out that we had, I believe, a total, Kevin, help me here, 12 to 14 water main breaks that we fixed over the last 14 months. 4 of them were significant. So if you fast forward back to 2020, the current quarter, we're now at 49 and some change, 49.51%. So we see that improvement. Kevin, could you expound on what you were pumping per day? Because this is kind of a grassroots way to look at it. What are we pumping every day based in thousands of gallons? So Kevin, were we at 700 at one point?
Yes, we were at 700 on the fourth quarter of 2019. Or 18, I'm sorry. And we fixed approximately, like you said, 13, 14 significant leaks. One that we found in February, I believe it was, in 2018. I think we were probably losing 300 to 400,000 gallons a day on that leak that was running. It was actually going back on West Sharon between 2 yards to a hydrant that is off of Springfield Pike. So no one reported it. So we got the leak detection equipment, and we end up finding that leak by listening to hydrants and track that down. We went from around 650 to 700,000 gallons a day to about 300 to 320,000 gallons a day and that's about normal for that time of year in February, because obviously no one's irrigating. And
so are you still averaging about 3.25, 350 a day now?
yes, that's right there. Sometimes we're even below 300, depending on when we get the reads. But yes, we're right around that 3 to 330 mark.
So Frank, a question, Frank, to you is, do you have a sense of the fact that we're pumping that much more water and we're not getting revenue for that? What is the cost to the village of doing that? Because at the end of the day, we need to figure out, I mean, it's a large number, but we need to understand what's the cost, the loss, the cost to pump water that we don't get revenue from. That way we can kind of dimensionalize how big is the problem to try to tackle that. Because in essence, if the water meters are basically giving the residents a break, the village is subsidizing the residents to a certain extent. But what is it costing the village to just generate that water?
Yeah, Steve, you may want to go over that from an operation standpoint, but obviously what you're doing is processing, let's say, twice the amount of water, which, if you can take the utilities, chemicals, all that kind of stuff, there is a, significant extra expense to pumping that much water. I don't Steve would be better off in talking about the, the size of that cost?
Yeah, you're going to be doubling the electrical consumption on the pumps, basically doubling the chemical usage. Those would be the two major things, really not going to impact staffing levels.
Sure, but Steve, so the analysis would be what is that number? Is that $5,000 a month? Is that?
I can look at it. We'd have to look at horsepower of pumps and chemical usage.
Because we,
average.
Might be able to look at what our expenses are for those things and then percentage addition to it.
So to answer right off the top of my head, I can't, but
yeah.
Right, we can look at
I think for the utilities committee, I think being able to dimensionalize that dollar amount is probably the first thing that we need to understand. And to assess, is this a big deal? Because if it is a big deal, then we need to have a plan in place that addresses that big deal. And of course, that's going to require money to go after that loss. So it's kind of like loss benefit analysis of how big is the loss? How much is it going to cost us to try to reduce that loss? And is this one of the top priorities for the village because of the dollar amount? The other side of the equation is like from a conservational standpoint, it doesn't make sense that we should be, wasting resources for something that we don't get a benefit from.
Let me ask a question for clarity, Steve Bell, Kevin Bell, rather. I understand that we have some amount of water leakage, but it's my understanding that whatever leakage we are having and have been experiencing is incidental to providing the water that's sent to the consumers, to the subscribers, rather than over pumping X amount, say 15% or 40% more than what's needed. If we reduce the amount of water that is being pumped, we would still have some water loss. Is that correct?
Yes, you're always going to have water loss. Like I said, what was it? Over 15% was sufficient. We flush hydrants, and obviously main breaks aren't metered. We also have a couple of pieces of equipment at the wastewater plant that uses water that's not metered as well. So you always have water loss. There's always going to be leaks out there that aren't surface, getting storm sewers, sanitary sewers. That's why we bought that piece of equipment to track those sneaky leaks down, because they all.
Kevin Bell has lost sound.
the Wi-Fi is going in the.
Kevin, can I ask you, we're pumping about 350,000 gallons a day. How much do we treat in the sewer a day?
Right now, it depends. Sewer plant with us facing the I&I issues, it's hard to get an accurate reading. It's usually in the summertime with the best readings. Right now, we're treating about a little over 1 million a day, it seems, with all the rain. But we are usually, I would say, in the summertime, we're right around treating 400, 300,000 gallons back in the wastewater plant. But we're also pumping out in the summertime, 600 because of sprinkler systems. We're not going to get that water back through the wastewater plant. I've looked at trying to compare it, and it's so hard with the I&I.
But that means then we're treating groundwater. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Is there any way to stop treating groundwater?
And that is what we keep looking at with the smoke testing, the dye testing, trying to find out how the water is putting into the sewer system. We have theories that catch basins may be tied into the sanitary sewer because we.
Yeah, I've been on council for a long time, and we've been doing this same project ever since I've been on council. I think, I've always had this theory that if you pump 350,000 gallons, but you treat 1,000,000 gallons, where's that 650,000 gallons coming from? And it can't be runoff. That's more runoff than it creates. So there's something amiss that doesn't pass my smell test, I guess is what I'm saying. Have we ever looked into other communities putting water into our system?
Steve, do you want to jump in here or you want me to? I don't think Steve hears me. So, Councilman Hello.
Extensive evaluations to see if there may be a cross connection. On the west side of town, it's a retirement community.
Yeah, but folks, what I think we need to stay focused on is, okay, one question is we're pumping more water than we're getting money from. How big is that problem? So that's problem A. How much does it cost us? Is that a big deal or not a big deal? So we need a dollar amount for that. The other question that Alan just brings up is, okay, we're treating more water than we should be treating. What does that cost us? I mean, at the end of the day, it should all be about cost. If these numbers are minimal in terms of cost to the village, then council should be reviewing this as what are the priorities for the village to be working on to reduce waste, and how big is those numbers? How much effort does the village want to put against addressing that versus other priorities? That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, but Mike, I agree with you there. Two things: if you're pumping 50% more than you're charging for, and then you're treating 3 times what you've put out, it's costing you 100%.
And what's that?
Twice as much to run the water treatment plant right now than what we're getting paid for.
I agree, but what's that number?
The number, if I may, Wally and Kevin prepared a total cost of treating water annually. I don't have the document in front of me. I was just trying to find it, but it's approximately $200,000. That's for chemicals, electric power, and all of the other necessary actions.
That's for pumping the water and
That's
treating.
that's for treating the water, correct?
That's a big number. That's
Yeah.
a big number.
Yes, it is. I think that we need. Can you hear me? I don't see my box.
If I may, we use that number to determine a cost comparison of water between ourselves and, for example, the city of Cincinnati. And that was part of the topic later in the meeting here, but the city of Cincinnati Waterworks quoted they would deliver water to us at $3.02 per gallon, or pardon me, per 100 cubic feet. And our cost from the figures that Wally provided was $2.59, considerably lower than what the $2.49. Sorry, thank you. That's considerably lower than what we would be available from the city of Cincinnati. But that number, $2.49, is what it costs us to produce a potable water gallon.
Yeah, can I jump in here?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But if we're working on it costs a lot of extra money. If our $2.49 a gallon cost is actually adding a 50
feet.
Huh? Okay.
To be clear, $2.49 per 100 cubic feet.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand that, but I also see this chart up here that says that we're 52% or 49% this year more than what we're billing for. That would make that $2.49 price under $2 or $2. Is that right?
That's correct, Mr. Holler, but it's also possible that the meters are slow. The water is still being consumed, but not metered. So we're not sure what answers we need to investigate.
Can't we connect a meter between each house and see what, and compare the meters to what's actually being pumped?
Well, as part of an investigation, we could pull meters and have them tested at the company that makes them to see what percentage of accuracy they have retained.
I would suggest we do that.
Well, actually, we are. We're not happy. Anything over 20%, we have to do that. I want to jump back real quick to the sewer situation because some things were said that aren't quite accurate. We're aggressively looking for areas to reline and to remediate cross-contaminated sewers. We're under orders from the Ohio EPA. We submit to them a monthly report that Mr. Frank Leon and Steve Cantor help us prepare of the things that we do monthly to remediate the amount of inflow and infiltration of stormwater into the sanitary sewer. So we do not have to treat it, so we will become compliant with the Ohio EPA. That's ongoing, so that won't stop it. I think going back to water, we definitely need to start looking at where else the leaks are taking place, or if it's the meters. And we may need some outside help from a contractor. And Kevin next week is scheduled to go out and revisit the entire village with the instruments that we bought. So that's a good start, and we need to talk more about that.
Yeah, I didn't mean to criticize the staff or yourself.
No.
It's just, this is an ongoing problem we've had ever since I've been in the village.
It's been ongoing since I've been here since 1988, but we've made great progress. The amount of water coming in the sewer plant is greatly reduced from what it used to be.
Yeah, well, as we fix water line, I think when we get this new system in Sharon Road, you're
Yes.
probably going to drop that 49% number down to about 20.
I really hope so. When we look at the main, when we dig it up to repair the many breaks, it's in bad shape. I'm sure it's leaking in many places.
Well, most of it's 100 years old.
Wally, let me just ask a quick question in terms of the time frame for that project. We focus so much on the money. Roughly how long would it take? When would you anticipate completion of that project?
I have to
Sharon
defer.
Road water main replacement.
Right. Would Steve or Frank like to weigh in on that? I think you have more expertise in that.
What do we have, 250 days, Frank, for the contractor?
270 days, but with the possibility of the lead replacements, et cetera, I think it's reasonable to say that project overall completion would be about 1 year.
Thank you. And after the water mains are replaced, would it be necessary or appropriate for appropriate is not the right word. Would it be necessary for the village to repave Sharon Road, that section of Sharon Road from Chester to wherever?
And that's an excellent question. And as a follow-up to it, I've been working with Kleinger's to prepare an application to the State Capital Improvement Program for 2021, anticipating that we will replace the main, then allowing us to take the opportunity to repave it from Route 4 to Chester Road, the entire thing. It'll be over $1 million. The option is to apply for SCIP, or State Capital Improvement Program, and offer them a 50% match to almost put us at the top of the rating scores, so that we would have a much better chance of getting the grant. If we didn't get it, we could look at Mr. Bessel's Finance Committee plan, where we spend $500,000 in 2021 and $500,000 in 2022 to repave all of it. Or we get the grant for 50% match, we do the whole thing in 2021 for just $500,000, saving $500,000. So I'm working on that, and I hope to report more to both the street committee and the utility committee progress made.
Thank you.
Wally, I have a question about the meters. I know years ago we had looked into the drive-by meters, and it was around $250,000, $250,000, I think, to replace all of the meters.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know, since that was pretty new technology, has that improved in price? And would that guarantee that we would actually be metering the use of the water instead of the meter slowing down?
That's a very good question, Debbie. I don't know what the current costs are for meters, but as you recall, we bought them in 2005 and they were Badger meters. The first year was 120,000. We bought them, installed them. The next year, we were to finance the meter heads that would electronically transmit the data to the village office computer systems. That was an additional $120,000. The next year, when we were ready for the meter transmitting device, the company went out of business. So we were unable to put the meter device transmitters on there. So they don't have them. 10 years, Frank and Steve, I believe, is the normal time you replace meters, and 15 max, and we're at 15 now if they're installed in 2005.
Yes, since yesterday, Wally, since we talked, just to give you a little perspective on current pricing, and we've replaced numerous entire systems of water meters for the same exact reason. But radio controlled or remote read meters with the appropriate software and billing program that all ties it all together. We're just wrapping up an estimate for a village with a very close to 1,000 meters, which would be very significant, or same as Glendale. And the project cost in today's dollars for all that, including engineering and all this contingencies, is about $457,000 for everything. So about 1,000 meters.
Does a project of that nature need to be engineered, or you simply contract the replacement?
Well, there's engineering to get the bid documents out and stuff, but that's most of that entire cost is the installation and the purchasing.
Now we have 1,050 accounts, so it is similar, but so obviously it's higher than 2005, right?
That's our current, and that was based on an estimating in 2019 for construction in 2020. So we're confident, given other ones we've seen, that's in the ballpark of where you would probably be to do the whole thing in one shot.
Thank you for that.
So, Mr. Chair, just a thought here, because we're jumping through a lot of stuff, all very interesting topics, actually. So we have a potential $200,000 a year lost opportunity if we could address the water loss, basically. That's on the front end of water generation. There's also what Alan was talking about is the over-treatment of water that also probably has a cost. We don't know what that is. But to me, I would offer the committee that we ought to look at all these numbers, and then for the committee to come forward then and say, these are some opportunities that the village ought to consider to recoup the $200,000. Here's the options that we can go after, and some kind of a schedule of events that say, well, part of it is also replacing water meters because they've been 15 years old. Because we need to have kind of an overall comprehensive program that could be shared, I think, with the residents on what are we doing in the utilities area. That would be a thought.
Would make sense. But by the way, Mike, the 200,000 is the cost of producing the current water volume, whether it's used or not. But any savings would we would still have a cost of, let's say, 150,000 for water that we do use. We can only save part of that 200,000, not 200,000.
Okay.
Can we back up just a little bit to the, don't be mad with me, but on the loan, the project to replace the water main is an important question I'd like to at least plant the seed, discuss now and into the future. Mr. Chairman, is that okay?
Yes, please.
So Mr. Frank Leone and I reported that there's $150,000 built into this bid as option A. That $150,000 is to replace the lines that are determined to be lead, and we don't know yet. There could be 78, there could be half that amount, but we built in 78 for the process. It's replace lead lines from the curb stop, which is the sidewalk, to the person's basement. Now, that's private property. However, we are mandated to replace the lead line from the water main to that curb stop. And that's built into the 1.4 and some change master price. The question at hand, I'll pose this to you and think about it. We don't have to answer that question now is, do we replace the residential line from the sidewalk to the house via that option of up to $150,000, which basically, as Frank said, is $2,000 per household. Maybe half of them have it, maybe 3/4. We'll find out when we do this. Do we do that to remediate the lead? And I'll explain my position. I think we should. Cincinnati has a program where they offer, when lead services are being replaced, curb stop to the house, a $2,000 payment towards the project. Unfortunately, these projects cost $4,000 to $5,000, maybe $6,000 normally. We happen to have a bid for $2,000 firm on every house, which is remarkably low, I think Frank mentioned. We would set a precedent if we did that we offer $2,000 for future lead lines to be replaced, but I think it's the right thing to do. And the reason I think it's the best thing to do is that Flint, Michigan is changing the rules with the Ohio EPA. I predict that they will, in the next 2 to 5 years, mandate that municipalities replace lead lines wherever they are, private or public property. And I would hate to be in a position 3 years from now to have a mandate to replace these lines that are going to cost $6,000 to $7,000 by then, to redig everyone's house when we can get it done for $2,000. So food for thought. We don't have to decide now, but there's some things to talk about.
Wally, how many homes do you believe still have lead pipe?
On Sharon or throughout the village?
Throughout the whole village.
Approximately 1/2 of our town is in the historic district. Traditionally, the lead lines are in the historic district. Outside the historic district, these are newer homes with newer proper lines. So if we have 1,050 taps, probably half of them are in the historic district, or maybe 60%. And the thing that I can't answer you, Alan, is how many have lead lines, because many people have replaced them on their own and they don't tell us. They replace it with a plumber from their house to the sidewalk, and that doesn't require a permit. They just replace it. A lot of people have done that. So we're going to learn something when we dig up Sharon Road and look at those 78 taps that are connected to the area that we're going to be replacing. And I'm going to toss a coin and say 50% will be lead.
Okay, so the $2,000 per home becomes $4,000.
No, we maxed it out on the bid as assuming all 78 have lead. So it's $2,000 per house. And we think we'll spend probably half that, or $75,000 for what we actually find.
Okay.
Just from a principal standpoint, I think we'll get a certain amount of pushback from residents that don't have lead lines, that they're going to be subsidizing people that do have lead lines. If the village pays for the water meter to the home itself, just a consideration.
That may happen, although if it's mandated 5 years from now, it's a scary thing.
Wally, it could be mandated now. Are you confident that it is not required now, currently?
I think Frank can weigh in on that, but right now, the only thing required is our lines must be replaced. And I would think at some point, because of Flint, and that the right thing to do is the EPA will mandate future all lines replaced.
Now, Steve, you can correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure when we dig up and we see a lead line on our side, we're responsible between the main and the curb. There's no repair. It's a total replacement. And we have to let the homeowner know that they have a lead line.
Yeah,
I'm
on the
sorry,
public
can,
side,
someone repeat what Kevin Bell was saying?
on the public side, it's required by the Ohio EPA. On the private side or the homeowner's side, it's not, but it's encouraged that the community provide some kind of help to get the private side lead service lines replaced, but it's not mandatory that you take on that financial obligation to do it.
Wally, this is Debbie. I know that years ago we talked about the amount of homes in the historic district that had possibly lateral replacement lead in the lateral lines. And we were talking about how the distance between the main line and the homes, and that what that would cost the homeowners. I'm thinking of a couple of homes on Sharon Avenue that sit quite far from Sharon Road. And the fact that there'd be a lot of disparity between the costs if you were just to say, X amount of dollars per house. And I agree with someone's comment that homeowners might resent the fact that they are underwriting somebody else's lateral repairs. It seems like, I think years ago, we talked about whether that would just become a decision that we would make as a village to pay for that instead of charging the residents. And that may be part of the consideration of what this committee is going to do.
Good point, Debbie. Maybe there's a hybrid solution where we offer them, the contractors, what I consider a very low price, irregardless of how far the house is back. He's quoted $2,000 per house. Maybe we offer them a 50% match to motivate them. My only fear is that some may say, no, I don't want to do that. But my thought is that if we pay for the whole thing and then require it to be done through legislation to get it off the table. But there are many, many ways we can do this. It could be put on the water bill over 3 years or something to motivate them. Hopefully we can get all of them to do the right thing.
You're talking about an assessment on an individual's water bill as opposed to taking the cost and putting it across everybody's?
Right. If there's 40 people need to have a replacement done at $2,000, that's $80,000. We could put it on their water bill over 2 years, let them pay it off and reimburse us since we pay it up front and lock in that very low price. Or maybe we offer them a 50% match. If they pay $1,000 to us, we'll pay the other $1,000. Or maybe we don't pay any of it and we just tell them, you need to do this. It's the right thing to do. And here's the contract to pay him directly. But I think at some point we'll need to get reimbursement from them no matter what we do.
Mr. Chairman, is this a conversation for a future committee meeting?
Yes, it is. There is also the consideration that once the lead lines are become, what I want to say, a prominent fact in the conversation of the village. Sorry, my process here is not functioning the way I want it. Once we identify that their lead lines are prominent in the village and those homes that are not along the water replacement line recognize that they may have to replace their lines, we need to plan on whether the village will participate in replacing those lines in the future. That is, if we say to the people along Sharon Avenue, we can replace your lines for $200 or $2,000, excuse me, can we offer that same value to the rest of the residents who may say, well, you did it for the homes along Sharon Avenue, why cannot you do that for us now? So we need to give some thought to how we address that in the future.
I recognize that, and I would also consider not just those homes along Sharon Avenue, but also the homes along Troy and perhaps elsewhere where the water main is being replaced or the water line is being replaced. Also, I would remind us all that there is still lead-based reporting requirements and obligations when lead is discovered in the project. And I think Steve Cantor spoke to that before. I'd like more information to the Utilities Committee from Wally at the county level, not necessarily the state level, but the county level for those reporting and repair requirements.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but what kind of reporting you're looking for? The quantity,
not the quantity, but when the county. I can speak to Wally later about this without unnecessarily extending this conversation. But I would like more information on the reporting requirements when lead is uncovered and discovered in the course of a repair project. What's the disclosure requirement? How would the homeowner know, for instance, that there is lead discovered in the underground pipe connecting to his house or whatever? Who has what responsibilities to disclose and repair? And I'd like to have some information on that is reliable and citable. Not right now. I want to reemphasize, not right now. We don't have that information before us.
Is that possible, Wally?
Can't hear you, Wally.
My space bar quit working, so I'll switch to manual. The one thing I can answer right now is that when Kevin or any employee discovers lead, we are required to notify the homeowner of that house that we're replacing it, and we notify the Ohio EPA. What the gap in the process to me is that when a homeowner decides to replace their lead line, they call a plumber, they get a permit from Inspection Bureau at Hamilton County Plumbing, and they replace their water line. We don't necessarily know whether it was lead or not. So therefore, when we uncover the earth, we'll find out in that situation.
Is there a simple process that a homeowner can determine whether they have lead lines or not, independent of the water of the utility service? Yes. Determining that?
There is a way. And Kevin's beside me now. I don't know if you can see him, but there is a scratch test process where you go into your basement if you have an inside meter, and usually lead lines are inside meters. Outside meters are newer, so they're not lead. And you take a knife and you scratch it, and you take off the corrosion or the dirt on it, and you can clearly see lead when you scratch it versus copper. You can identify that.
Okay. That was curious about how difficult that was. It sounds fairly simple, and we can at some point in time suggest that homeowners do that.
Right. It's assuming that the line's the same all the way underground and wasn't corrected up to the foundation outside. There's a lot of variables, so usually the digging is the best way. But yeah, we can do scratch tests. We can do that for them at no charge.
Thank you.
Understood. Any other discussion on that topic?
Mr. Chair, I have some information for the committee on rates. I just received some rate information from one of the banks that we do business with. If I can share that.
Please.
15, they would recommend a 15-year loan versus a 20-25 or versus some of the ones that we have optional here. 15 at 2.8%, 20 at 3%. The recommendation from the vice president of the bank said we have a very good rate with OWDA.
I agree. It's versus 1.3, was it?
1.37, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure it makes the decision easier.
Mr. Lumpson, can you drop the chart now so we can see each other? Thank you.
We are, yeah. Okay, any further discussion? Any questions, comments? Okay, if I may, to move on a little here, on the agenda, I had wanted to address the fact that in the December meeting, I had brought up the possibility of using Cincinnati Waterworks to provide water, and basically we would shut down the water plant. Wally made, as I mentioned earlier, a request of the city of Cincinnati, and a quote was given of $3.02 per 100 cubic feet, which is considerably higher than the $2.49 that our water plant is capable of producing. So in addition to that fact that we would still be at a much higher rate, the city of Cincinnati would not take responsibility for our wastewater system or for the distribution of the water, that is our water distribution pipes that we're talking about, and we would still have to maintain those. So with the fact that the Cincinnati Waterworks cost was considerably higher than ours, and we would still have the maintenance costs of the distribution system, it is obvious that that is not an option. I just kind of wanted to bring that to a closure there because I had brought it up in the last meeting. David, would you bring up that first slide, please?
When you say first slide, which chart are you looking for?
I'm sorry, that would be the usage table, the distribution table. The bar chart. The bar chart. Just as a matter of information for the committee, this is a graph of the water consumption distribution, and you'll see on the column for 500 cubic feet usage that of our 1,050 residents use less than the 1,000 cubic feet per quarter. And you can see the distribution there that for the most part, about 35% of the residents use the minimum or less. The remaining 65% from the 12 greater than 1,000 cubic feet per quarter are distributed as you see it. And out at the far end of the graph, the usage of 40 to nearly 600 cubic feet per quarter represents the various schools, the restaurants, etc., and some individuals who have large usage for pools or watering their lawns. But I just wanted to bring that up. That is the fact that for the most part, residents are in the lower range of our bills and are very close to the minimum and should not be affected significantly by the water increase.
For some reason, Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but for some reason, I can no longer see the visual, your chart on my screen. I'm wondering if anyone else is experiencing this.
I can see it.
I can see it.
Let me try something.
Okay.
Jeff, let me ask you a question while we're working on Marilyn's computer. How long is this? Is this a year? Is this what's the time period that we're looking at?
This is per quarter.
Per quarter.
Yes.
Can we then assign a another bar of income from that quarter? Could you show us what it looks like? It looks like this is how much we're distributing, correct?
Yes.
How much are we being paid for? If you-
Okay,
I mean, if we're distributing, it looks like for the quarter, what is that? How many millions of CFF? Do we have a total?
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, but I'm saying if it better be more than $2.24 as 100 CFF, right? Is that correct?
Yes, $202.49, I believe was the cost.
What I'm saying with your chart there, Jeff, you ought to know how much your potential billing is,
I could determine that, yes.
and then we can see if that billing is less than $2.24 a 100 CFF, then we are in big trouble.
Well, I'm not sure that it would apply on this particular chart, Alan, because all the chart is showing is that, for example, 500 families use less that or use 500 cubic feet per quarter of the for example, at 1,000 cubic feet, which is the minimum bill, there are 550 residents using 10 or under. So that's just a distribution of what each household is using.
Okay.
It doesn't represent cost.
To me, like it would be total water consumption for the quarter, but you've got it broken down as by household use.
This is just users, number of users under 1,000 cubic feet, for example.
All right. Well,
or the number of users somewhere. You are on here somewhere, let's say with a pool, and if you had a pool, and there are approximately looks like 20 houses using 400 or 4,000 cubic feet per quarter.
mm-hmm.
That's just information to put perspective in how the distribution is. There is a high end of commercial users who represent an opportunity to generate more money, more income because of usage, and they are paying the volume charge. Whereas on the lower end of scale, the minimum bill is represented or used by about 35% of the residents.
Okay.
The next chart, if you please, David. Could you do that next? Thank you, David.
Yep, pulling it up now.
Thank you.
I'm just now seeing it. Thank you.
Okay. This is a comparison of our costs with the.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Very often we hear how expensive Glendale water is. This chart is a comparison by quarter of our costs with the city of Cincinnati and with a similar sized community, which is Lockland. And as you can see, at 1,100 cubic feet, which is the minimum, our costs are approximately $60 or $70 per quarter higher than Cincinnati or Lockland. We are a little higher, this illustrates, in cost, but this does not include the cost of wastewater treatment. Both, obviously, the city of Cincinnati and the village of Lockland use the Metropolitan Sewer District, whose cost of wastewater treatment is considerably higher than ours. Again, this is by the quarter, and assuming we don't we bill by the quarter. The city of Cincinnati bills by once a month, and Laughlin bills once every 2 months. So these numbers are simply a combined quarterly basis and at the various volumes. So yes, we are higher, but unless you're using a very large quantity of water, we are very competitive. Thank you, David. Close that.
Jeff,
Yeah.
you got to remember that the village of Laughlin also has an industry base that we don't have, and that will always reduce the cost per CFF.
Oh, right.
And so you can't really, you need to compare, you need to compare another village like ours. I would say you're looking at maybe Terrace Park.
Right, if you may offer
Because you're divided, like Evendale here has got a real low water thing for their residents because they've got GE and they've got these big industries that keep that water down. We have no industry. We don't divide ours except for residents. And if you have a pool, yes, you pay more because you have that pool. My wife waters our grass and our bill is astronomical. So, but her flowers look good. So
They're beautiful.
It's a trade-off, right? Happy wife, happy life. That's
members of the utility committee. I think in the past, we've often looked at the city of Wyoming because they also produce water and they have similar demographics. Although they're 3 times larger, their utilities are very similar to ours. And I might add that our rates are lower than theirs right now. So it'd be good to see them on the chart in the future.
yeah. It's Laughlin's a bad. I hate to say this on television, but Laughlin's a bad example for everything that we do in Glendale. It is completely different than a village like Laughlin.
I understand that. I chose Laughlin because they do have their own water plant where there are no other villages that do, as I understand it. So Laughlin was, pardon me?
Wyoming does have their own water plant.
Oh, do they? Okay. I was not aware of that. In any event, yes, Alan, as you mentioned, we do not have industry, but our problem primarily, as we've talked in the past, is that we don't have enough customers. So we can produce much more water, a much higher volume, satisfying a much greater need, but we can't sell it because we don't have enough people who are buying it. You can help by watering the lawn even more.
So, Mr. Chair, I've got a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
The chart that you just showed shows that Glendale CFM costs are higher than those 2 other comparative communities. But in the previous discussion, we had talked that the water cost was 2.49, but City of Cincinnati was 3.02. So which would say that Glendale water would be less than Cincinnati. I'm just trying to quantify for a resident that might be looking at the charts and listening to the discussion. If this thing shows that we're way higher, yet you indicated 2.49 versus 3.02 for Cincinnati, how do reconcile those 2 discussions?
Thank you, Mike, for bringing that up. It's a very, very valid point. The $3.02 that is quoted us is a wholesale price, and with that we still have to pay for the distribution system on ours, whereas in this case, the City of Cincinnati is including the cost of maintaining the water distribution system, the hydrants, et cetera. So their cost includes maintenance, as does ours, but it's divided among 1 million residents versus, 1,035 homes.
Okay, thank you.
The city is not, this is, when you, again, we're comparing cost per gallon, not cost per 100 cubic feet and the various minimums. Okay, any other questions? Do I hear them? Then we can have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
So moved. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank and Steve, for participating. Much appreciated.